give or take percent, is in staff and staff-related expenses. I don't know what cuts we do that don't hurt. And so this is a space where, as staff and with the superintendent's endorsement, we made a recommendation because we felt like it was impacting a small minority of our students for the coming year. And for services, albeit in-person service as opposed to virtual, instruction can still be provided for these students, except it's in an in-person model instead of a virtual model for the elementary level. And I would say, you know, it's a difficult decision that none of us wanted to make.
So I'd like to speak to that. And we're really talking about eliminating the elementary portion of the ABLE program, correct?
Correct.
We had a global pandemic, and all through that global pandemic, we heard how we were failing our students because we weren't having them in school to receive in-person instruction. That virtual learning, distance learning, was ruining our kids, putting them further and further and further behind. Now we're saying, well, it's something that we should make available to our students. It should be a choice. Now we know as a school system, our model of delivery of instruction, and it's in person, and this is what it is. But we're going to now run a parallel model. We're going to have a second school system here for those who would prefer not to use the in-person model. As an educator, as someone who has worked with elementary students, I know how little ones learn. And I know that I feel that those little ones probably had the most difficulty during that pandemic with distance learning. I have great difficulty in advertising, saying, here's something that you might want to consider, when I don't believe in my heart that it's in their best interest, that it's not the optimal way to deliver instruction. It's not the best way for kids to achieve academically. So is there a place for middle and high school students? I'm willing to wait to see, but the fact that the numbers have dropped significantly over the years following the pandemic leads me to believe that we're going to see fewer and fewer students who are taking advantage of this option. May prove me wrong. Do I think that there are opportunities to use distance learning, virtual learning? I absolutely do. One other anecdote I would throw in is that I'm a product of Washington County Public Schools. In third grade, I began being instructed by instructional TV, and that continued through high school. My third grade class, I believe, was the first group of students to receive that instruction. Would I be a better mathematician had I not had high school math on TV? You betcha. Would I be doing better had I not been instructed in an auditorium filled with kids? But it was something that was innovative at the time. Would people go back and make a different decision, given all of what we know now about instructional TV? Perhaps. I don't know. But I just think we have a lot of things to consider as we determine what's in the best interest of these very young learners, and how we're providing their instruction.
I also want to say that I was a product of that too. And je parle en français because I began in first grade. And had I not had calculus via TV, we wouldn't have had it at our school. We simply wouldn't have had it. So we went at 8 o'clock in the morning so we could take calculus back then. So it's a double-edged sword, and there are a lot of things that have to be considered. Having had 5 children go through the pandemic all in first, second, and third grade, had it not been for distance learning availability, we could have been very, very behind. And if you think about what it's going to cost to run a bus 1, 2, 3, 4 years from now, we have to have in place some alternative. Not saying that it's good or bad, it's just necessary.
Mr. Snyder?
I would just be curious, kind of to go off of what Mrs. Williams was saying about academic performance, if there was a difference between students enrolled in ABLE and students enrolled in just regular in-person learning.
Snyder, excuse me, could you pull the microphone?
Yeah, sorry.
I'm having difficulty hearing.
I would just be curious to know about a difference in academic performance between students enrolled in the ABLE online program in elementary and students enrolled in in-person learning, and if there was maybe a difference in, like, because obviously we haven't had the program long enough to see really a longitudinal difference, but if there was another system that has been following a model like this, if they've seen that these students have had a difference in academic success over the years.
It's actually, you're spot on, Graham. We've only had this program really for MCAP data purposes, 1 year that you can really look at, and that would be spring of 2023. However, the state has also asked that same question because we're not the only one that has a virtual program. We match the state. For English language arts, we're actually a little bit higher performance, and for math, we're a tad bit lower. So it's mixed results when you look at just, to your point though, 1 year of data.
President Williams,
Yes, sir.
for the benefit of the board, I just want to mention and recognize that these are really difficult decisions. It's difficult for you. Certainly it was difficult for the superintendent and staff. We have pretty significant true needs that exist in our school district. And recognizing that this recommended, and I stress, it's a recommended cut, that is painful because it is meeting the needs of some of our learners. But our goal in this, leading up to this work session and ultimately, excuse me, the adoption of the Board of Education's budget, we wanted to make sure that your questions in targeted areas were addressed. In particular, we wanted to share with you, per your request, trend data on this targeted area regarding the academic blended learning education, in particular at the elementary level. Certainly, while when you look at this cost-wise, it is one of the most expensive options at the elementary level. But I go back to the fact that there remain significant true needs that with even the full request being met, we recognize that there were nearly, over $14 million worth of needs that were not in this proposed budget that we've outlined for this board in terms of staffing needs and other items that certainly are going to need to be addressed in the future. But I just want to make the point that our effort here in this work session is to provide you with data. And I believe the dialogue and the question is very healthy. And ultimately, we want to best position this board, hopefully in 2 weeks now, to adopt a budget, but recognizing these are really hard decisions. It was difficult for the superintendent staff to bring these recommendations forward, just knowing there are far greater needs beyond this requested budget.
Dr. Savine, are there any other questions? I had one question.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
What's the total cost? Do we know that of running ABLE? Can we put a dollar amount on that, like $500,000, $300,000? What?
Give us a minute.
Just curious. If you don't have it now, it's all right. You can get it to us later.
Maybe if it's all right, maybe we'll come back to that while the guys are looking at the data, unless.
So for elementary able, it's about $700,000 in total to run that. And if you're looking at the middle high school level, it's about 1.4 million to run it at the middle high school level. So it's about 2.15 in total.
And what would the cost savings be? Because obviously we're not firing the teachers, we're moving them back in the school system. So what would the actual cost savings be if we did that?
So if you think about where we were, excuse me, Cameron, I'll jump in maybe. If you look at where we were from the draft budget to the recommended budget, we had initially planned to include the grades 1 through 5 virtual program running. We were actually going to transfer the location. As we think about innovative ed, middle and high school is going to be operating out of what's currently at the Antietam School. We actually were going to have the elementary program running out of Eastern Elementary School. So those teachers could collaborate also with grade level teachers at Eastern as well. And so the reduction that we showed in eliminating the elementary program from innovative ed, from the superintendent's draft to the superintendent reduction or superintendent's recommendation, was about 5 positions. Typically, we use about $85,000 as an average starting salary when we talk about a bringing in a new teacher. Transferring the teachers that are there into another position as opposed to hiring someone new, I would argue that's the amount you're looking at. So, give or take $425,000, I think is a fair number.
Do we know from the last 2 years of it how the achievement levels on MCAP and so forth, well, MCAP doesn't start till third grade, but is there any measure of how well students who were unable compared to in-person instruction as to achievement levels?
I think that's the question Dr. Willow answered, before, and I think, we're, want to come back and reiterate?
And I'm just talking able elementary through high school, lumping math and ELA together. For math, our students on able typically were a little worse than our in-person learning. And that does differentiate by grade, but if I use the old smush term to take third grade through algebra and smush them together. On the other side, for the English Language Arts MCAP, students on able were performing at a higher level than in person. So it's mixed, but again, I would point out that it's hard to take trends off of 1 year of data since MCAP wasn't in play when we were in the pandemic.
I have a question. When we opened ABLE, one of the justifications for it was that other counties, we would be competing with other counties and we would lose students to other counties and they would get the per pupil allowance, like if they go to Frederick, if Frederick offered it. Do we know, have other counties started to, are they still offering elementary online?
My understanding, but again, I think I would defer to the instructional folks behind me, but I understand that that's still active.
Okay. So there would be a possibility of those kids. You don't know for sure, but.
So yes, we have a number of schools across the state that have virtual programs. Not as many in elementary. I don't have the exact number of that. I believe I serve on a committee with the Frederick County principal for their alternative or for their online learning, and I believe their enrollment is around 2,000 students. But again, that is a much bigger system, middle and high school included in that. The law that was going to allow for students to go to other counties did not pass last year. So that's not in play as of right now. So if we didn't offer it, there is no option to go join Frederick County as of now.
Okay, thank you.
And just for purposes, you could request to attend. This would be like any other situation we run into with Barbara Ingram from time to time. You could request to attend, but you would be responsible as a parent to pay the local share. The state funding would follow, but you'd be responsible to pay the local share.
Okay.
So, and I would think based on the demographics we've shown where 70% of the students are eligible for free reduced price meals, I would argue that most of our families probably couldn't afford to pay that local share.
So, Mr. Pruitt, I have a question about the farm students that are participating in the ABLE program. Sorry. I have a question about the farm students that are participating in the ABLE program, the elementary students. If these students were to be in an elementary school that is a Title I school that has a Title I program, which all of our Title I elementary schools are, okay? They would be recipients of services that are available in those Title I schools. Do we have any way of providing those Title I services to the students who are in the ABLE program?
We do not.
Okay, and I asked this question during our Finance Committee earlier this week or last week about meals that these students are eligible. We have no way of feeding these students any of the students, whether elementary, middle, or high school, who are eligible for free and reduced meals. We have no way of doing that, correct?
It's correct. So when the ABLE program was first established, USDA, which is the federal oversight agency, of course, for the National School Lunch Program, was still operating on the summer meals option, which is the emergency provision for the school meals program. So under the provisions during the emergency provision, we were able to serve non-congregate meals to any student anywhere in the county at no cost. And what that meant was that if a student could get to, or their parent, let's say, could get to the homeschool, let's say they were in walking distance to Smithsburg Elementary, we made arrangements and figured out how we could have set up that if an ABLE student wanted to get a lunch, if they could get to their home school, the staff at the home school could provide the lunch, and the student would have the lunch just like any other student in the county. Now that the emergency provisions are gone from the National School Lunch Program, it is an on-site only, has to be consumed on-site meal program. So ABLE runs the same sort of 30-minute lunch that all of our other school programs operate. So there's really not the means for the student to get to the school, partake in the lunch, get back home, and be on class in a timely fashion.
Thank you. And then I have two more questions, and Dr. Willow may be the person to address these questions. One is the percentage of students attending ABLE
Watson's High School.
who are special education students. Do we know what percentage are special education students? And are we able to appropriately provide the services those students require via distance learning?
So I do not have the exact number of special education students. It was last year above 10%. We do have a case manager through ABLE that does meet all of the IEP needs. But when a student is enrolling in ABLE or making that choice, there is an IEP meeting that is determined just to make sure what type of services can be met through the IEP. And I also know that ABLE has a schedule where teachers are free. They have office hours built into their day to be able to provide additional supports as needed.
Thank you. And then my last question is about English learners. Do we have a percentage of students attending ABLE who are English learners, and are we able to provide the services that those students need?
Right now, that number is low. At one time, we had a higher number of EL, ML students, and we did have staffing assigned to ABLE, like a 0.2 or a 0.3, if you will. What that means is somebody that's supporting ABLE potentially 1 day a week, or not at a full-time level. Based on current enrollment, I do not believe we have anyone serving ABLE in that role, but I would want to confirm that with the team before I gave you a definite.
Colleagues, are there any further questions about Academy of Blended Learning before we move on? No? Okay, then I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, so next item is having discussion on teacher salary scales. As a matter of history, I think the board members can remember that in the bill we affectionately called Baby Blue, which was the first blueprint bill back in 2019, WCPS was the recipient of $2.5 million under that bill for the purposes of assisting in teacher salaries, specifically targeted towards the front end of the scale, with the goal of helping to meet the requirements of the blueprint, which is that by June 30, 2024, all teachers need to realize at least a 10% increase in salary. And of course, by July 1, 2026, starting teacher salary needs to be at $60,000. So we had a significant increase that year in teacher starting salary. And since that time, WCPS has been able to maintain the highest starting salary in all of Maryland related to new teachers that are coming on board with a bachelor's degree. We've recently done some analysis looking at the bachelor's, master's. There's several scales that we have in our teacher contracts, also all the way up to a doctorate degree. And I'm going to walk you through what some of the most recent data is for this current school year. The data set is at the bottom of this slide, and I'll kind of walk you through it as we go one by one. So I can get there we go. The thicker red line will always be WCPS. So I'm going to walk these in sort of one at a time. This is initially we're looking here at the bachelor's degree scale, which is the starting scale. You can see that line starts out a little under $60,000. We're in the $57,000 range. And off the top of my head, the exact dollar value eludes me, but still remains one of the highest in the state of Maryland. The next line, this gray line that comes in, is actually Frederick County. And what you'll note here is when they get out to about year 18, 19, they flatline. And they, on this particular scale, and I'm a little out of my wheelhouse here, but there's a requirement of teachers to receive a master's degree within so many years. And so in a lot of cases, a lot of systems just get to that point. They say, if you're not here by this point, there's no additional level, and they just flatline it. And that's what you see here with Frederick County. But what you can see is that for teachers that have just their bachelor's degree, by about year 8, 9, that intersects with the Washington County line. Oops, wrong button. The next line here is Allegheny County. Again, Allegheny County starts out lower than Washington County, actually slightly higher than Frederick, less than Washington County. But again, by about the year 9, 10, it intersects with Washington County and starts to exceed Washington County. And they actually don't even develop a scale that goes out as far. Their scale stops at about year 13. The next line is Garrett County, of course, out to our far west. They are also trailing the other 3 western counties, and their scale stops at 10 steps. Green happens to be Berkeley County, immediately to our south, and this will be a consistent line for Berkeley County. The nature of how salary scales are done statewide in the state of West Virginia, Berkeley County, as you see, all of these will be fairly significantly behind the rest of the counterpart in the region. The next line actually heads to our north into Franklin County to Chambersburg. Their starting scale is a little bit less than ours. They cross our scale at about year 5, and year 5 and beyond, again, they exceed Washington County, and they flatline again at about year 12, 13, where they don't have scales moving forward. The burgundy line that we just slashed in is Greencastle Antrim School District, again crossing over with Washington County at about year 4, and consistently being ahead of us. They also flatline in about 15, 16 years out, and stay considerably ahead. And the last line there that I dropped in is the Waynesboro area school. So you kind of get a little bit of a matrix and a view of what's going on. What you see here is fairly consistent. So if we move to the master's degree scale, and now they're all sort of in there together, again, we're still a little ahead on the master's degree scale, but consistently, Frederick, Chambersburg, Allegheny, Greencastle, and here moving forward, Waynesboro as well is above where Washington County is for teachers with a master's degree. So we look at teachers with a master's degree plus 30 additional credits. Again, it's a consistent thread. Garrett and Berkeley are below us. All of the other districts are typically ahead of us on the line, except for perhaps when you get way out to the end of the scale. Franklin County schools tend to flatline. their scale at a certain point and it moves forward. But again, at some point there, when you've got, I think, 20 years invested probably in the state, you're not looking necessarily to move at that point. And then lastly, you see the doctor's degree scale. And you can see what's going on here. Where we are positioned regionally is pretty consistent across the board, where the salaries tend to be higher across most of our certification levels in Frederick, Greencastle, Waynesboro, Chambersburg, fairly consistently. Allegheny as well, with only Garrett and Berkeley County, West Virginia being less. One of the other areas that we looked at just as we started analyzing this, differences also in the retirement system and where what's hurting us also as well, I think, as a state of Maryland, as an importer of teachers, is and typically have imported from a state like Pennsylvania that traditionally graduated a lot of teachers. And of course, they're not graduating as much as they used to, but what is hurting us is that their retirement system is actually stronger. At the base level, they actually have multiple levels, but at the base level, the amount that the employee has to put in is less, and the multiplier when you start calculating the retirement payout at retirement time is greater than it is in Maryland. So that's something that's a hindrance as well. And if we think that we might be able to steal teachers, and I use that term loosely, entice teachers to come to work in Washington County, let's say from immediately our north in Franklin County, those two things together with the salary being greater and the retirement being greater, I think it would be a hindrance. And so I think I'll pause here if board members have questions on the salary slides.
Colleagues, questions?
Yeah, so so we got this information in an update, and it for some reason it just didn't look right to me. Oh, sorry. Yeah, for some reason it just didn't look right to me when I was looking at what we got in preparation of this, and what we got was actual list of what it was by the year and all that stuff, and some of those numbers were just kind of jumbled, and I feel like that's what happened here too, because I actually was looking, and Frederick County for the masters stops at 20, and we are less than them by $10,000, and I don't know, maybe I just can't really see it the way it's presented there, but we never are less than $10,000 within what Frederick County is providing for the salary. And at the end of the day, I mean, I know we like to compare ourselves to Frederick as far as what we're paying, but, especially on the bachelor scale, it looks like we should be more comparing ourselves to what Greencastle is doing. But it also sounds like more of the teachers we lose based on some of the questions we asked. It sounds like we lose more teachers to Frederick, which I don't know. I don't know. I guess this is more of a comment. Something just doesn't seem right with me on this, and I don't know if maybe I was looking at it wrong or what, or if it's just the presentation of this chart. But when I went back and looked, it didn't look like there was that big of a discrepancy, especially when you factor in the wealth in Frederick compared to the wealth here. The cost of living is significantly higher in Frederick. So, to go and compare ourselves to Frederick, it seems to me like, quite frankly, we're doing a really good job compared to them.
I think where we're losing folks to Frederick, and it's similar to, I think, why, and I would agree with you. I think as staff, we tell you we lose more staff to Frederick than we do, let's say, to Franklin County, in part because once you're in the retirement system, you don't want to lose your years here by moving into another state and losing your years in those out of the retirement system. So I think that's one of the reasons why we see people maybe move east-west as opposed to north-south. Where we're losing folks to Frederick often is folks that are just willing to make the commute. It's not a ridiculous drive to make that move into Frederick. They're not necessarily moving to Frederick, or we have staff that for whatever reason live in Frederick and work here and make the decision to work closer to home. Frederick also, which kind of ties into maybe the next topic, but Frederick also offers some retiree benefits at an earlier stage than Washington County does, and that's something that I'm also starting to research. I don't have a lot of data for you today, but that's also something we're starting to research as we look at the whole pie, and we think about the blueprints and teacher recruiting, and it's not just the salaries, to your point. It is the demographics of where you live and the cost of living of where you live. It's also retiree benefits. It's also health insurance. And so we're doing an additional digging into those areas to make sure that we can put together the full package that makes sense. And so I hope that's helpful in terms of, it's $10,000. For some, it's like, no, it's not enough. For some, it's like, yeah, I'm going for $10,000. Or I'm willing to take on that commute. Or I live there, this one's closer. Or, I'm only making the run, let's say, to Middletown or Brunswick, and I'm not going all the way to Oakdale, let's say. So it all plays out together for individuals, folks' decisions.
And as a finance guy, I would definitely expect you to look at the economics of it, but I think we also really need to take a deep look. Teachers may move because of the cost, whether it's their salary, whether they get to retire early, name it, whatever it is, financial reasons, yes, that very well may be the reason why teachers move. But teachers don't start looking unless there is a problem in the school system. And it really disappoints me that we don't discuss that more. I know that there are many teachers that are really concerned about the behaviors that they see in school and the lack of control they have over their classroom, because as soon as a kid is disrupting class, for a teacher to be able to remove that student is like pulling teeth. And so I know, especially at the elementary level, which takes me back to Able, that a reason why I'm upset that we're not willing to innovate that. It really upsets me that we're not looking at other avenues, because if we're going to try to compete financially with a county that has half of the poverty that we do and twice the population, we're going to lose every time. We need to think of something different to do, and that is to give the teachers the control of their classroom again.
Okay, I'm not seeing other comments. I'll move to the last slide. Again, the first bullet we just talked about, we're looking at some retiree benefits and ways that we may be able to enhance the total package for our staff, and that's something that more to come. I'm not sure that that's an item that necessarily will be completed and ready for consideration when you're adopting the budget. This may be something we bring to you at a later time, but wanted to get that on the board's radar screen as well. One of the things we are considering and that we've talked about as staff for quite a while, actually, over the last 6 months to a year, is in terms of retiree health benefits, Washington County uses an 85 factor. That's a combination of your years of service to Washington County and your age. And so we offer benefits, health insurance benefits to retirees and dependents at a price level that is based on a factor. So 85 being the most, which is consistent with the rate that the employee pays when they're active, when they're a working individual. They would maintain that roughly 85-15 split on health insurance through retirement for themselves and their dependents. If you have less than 85, there's a sliding scale. 84 to 81 or 84 to 80 is another level. 79 to 75 is another level. So we're looking at that point to say, is there a way, for instance, if you've worked 30 years in the state of Maryland in a public school system, you're eligible for full retirement benefits on your pension system. And so is there a way to say that if you have service to Washington County of 30 years, you could also effectively have earned the 85 points. And by example, I'll give you, if you've got a brand new teacher that starts out of college, let's say 22 years old, and works 30 years, they're 52 years old at the time that they're eligible for state Maryland retirement pension benefits. They have 82 points in Washington County. So they're effectively 2 years from being eligible for their insurance benefits. Would there be an incentive? Would there be a benefit to staff if we were able to marry those together? That if you've reached the 30 years, that gives you full pension benefits, you're also getting your retiree insurance benefits. So that's one of the things that we're analyzing as we look at this. The second bullet here is that we're analyzing the effects of the General Assembly session. We received information on the state finance call last Thursday related to what appears to be the defunding of Tier 2 pre-kindergarten for the FY25 year, that the General Assembly moved the date in a bill that requires the funding of Tier 2 pre-kindergarten students out to a future year. And therefore, there's funding that we had planned on for FY25 that may not be available. We have an internal amount that we've calculated based on that, but we don't have the final state aid document from the state. And so that was one of the reasons why we had initially planned to have an approval of the board's draft tonight during the business meeting, but we as staff felt like we don't know what the ramifications of everything that's come out of the General Assembly, and this piece, this pre-kindergarten piece, is a big piece. It may be a reduction in revenue of another $1 million or more, and therefore we weren't prepared to ask you to present to approve a budget that we didn't know what the numbers were. So we're hoping that by the time we get around into the month of May for your next meeting, we'll have that data for you and be able to share. And there may be other effects of other bills that may have cost implications that we're vetting through now during the flurry of the last week in the session. So with that, happy to take any more questions, and as well as staff that you may have.
Mr. Bickford.
I know from personal experience, when my wife considered, because she's a teacher in Frederick County, full disclosure, and she considered moving up here and was offered a job up here. And in the end, we were comparing, finances, because it is cheaper to live here, and we were seeing if there would be a difference. But in that situation, Frederick County was more generous when it came to when they would get to plus 30 and plus 60, I believe. They counted more of the credits that teachers have to take. So she was, and that wouldn't apply here. So it ended up being, so that's another thing too, I think is examining how fast some of the teachers or what classes they can take to get them to that next level. I don't know if there's parity between our two counties, but I just wanted to weigh that in because I remember that was a pretty big difference, even when we factored in the cost of gas that she spends to go over the mountain every day.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, then we'll wrap up. Dr. Savine, do you have anything else?
Yes,
Before we bring this to a close?
Yes, President Williams and members of the board, as we prepare to close our budget work session, I do want to reference a budget-related item. In particular, I would like to correct the misinformation that was shared at the March 12th Board of Commissioners meeting regarding reading in Washington County Public Schools. Our reading apprenticeship program will continue for the 2024-25 year and will be funded from state grant dollars. We had the privilege of celebrating the class of 2024 reading tutors last week at a special ceremony at South High School. I extend my appreciation, board members that were able to attend, Dr. Zentmeyer, Dr. Williams, or Mrs. Williams, President Williams, and Mr. Stauffer. I'll just mention that as I did that night, our reading tutors continue to make a big impact on improving the reading skills of our youngest elementary readers. And this program also serves as a pipeline for growing our future educators. Board members may recall that the Reading Tutor Apprenticeship Program was one of my administration's first initiatives in August of 2022. And I'm pleased to share that, as I've also mentioned earlier in this budget process a few months ago, the Reading Tutor Apprenticeship Program will continue through funding made available by state grant dollars. President Williams, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. So colleagues, if there's nothing further, we'll bring this work session to an end, and we will be meeting in the conference room. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Dr. Savine.